think we're on. Welcome to episode 80. We've been having technology problems today, so I hope my camera stays on, I hope the computer stays on, and I hope you guys get all the information you need from this one. So today we're going to jump into mental setbacks with injuries, sickness, and getting back into the groove of things because of lack of motivation due to those things. This was actually a question from one of our clients, Ziad, so thank you for the topic, because I always love getting information from you guys on what you want to hear more about. So I've actually had this from a couple clients too, as like suggestions, and I just obviously never really jumped into it. So now hearing it from a third person, I was like, okay, I think today's the day we talk about it. So I jotted down some things, not in any really particular order. I wrote them down, basically what came to my brain first thing. And I hope it helps you guys out a little bit more with this, because I know I have definitely struggled with this, with injuries especially. But, you know, really to jump right into it, when you think about injuries and sickness and new jobs or a new kid or change in life, like there's definitely always going to be these setbacks. So the first thing that I wrote down, which I think is super important to understand and remember just for the rest of your life, you are always going to deal with this, right? So having that perspective and that mindset and that approach to it overall, I think is a really kind of empowering place to be in no matter what, because if you don't expect those things to happen to you, you're going to be a victim to that situation when it does happen, and being a victim to any situation is a very powerless and helpless place to be. So I always like to remind people, like, no matter what, like, remember that what you're feeling is genuine, right? What the position you might be in is hard, and I'm not discrediting that, but I always like to remind people that no matter who you are, what you do, your style of training, trying to be the person that avoids injuries and sickness as much as possible, we run into these things, right? So having that understanding to begin with, I think is, like I said, it's just a more empowering place to begin. So I wanted to kind of open up that conversation with it, because the empowerment is really what allows us to stay open-minded to the fact that it might happen, and then really not being victim to that situation allows us to really stay in a place of control, to focus on what we can control and not what we can't control, right? So first thing I wanted to jump into talking about that is when we think about these setbacks in life and kind of what it does for us mentally and the mindset that follows up with it, it's really, really hard place to be, because it's a really low motivation era, and that can lead to some anger, and it can lead to some disappointment, and it leads to changing the lack of consistency, which we all know consistency is one of the hardest things to achieve. So we look at motivation and discipline as kind of two different principles, right? Motivation is something that you want to leverage, but discipline is definitely something you want to be able to build and create for yourself, right? Here's the way that I like to explain it to myself, right? Is when I look at motivation, I think about it being both intrinsic and extrinsic, right? So you think about something being extrinsic is going to be like results or a competition or a wedding or whatever, something outside of yourself that is helping you stay motivated towards a certain subject or a certain goal. These are really, really, really important things to have for some personalities, right? Now, it's not something that you should rely on, but I think it's a very helpful thing to use, and I'll expand on this a little bit more in a second. Intrinsic motivation is basically that internal desire, that internal motivation for ourselves to do that thing. Like, I am not doing anything for anyone or anything else. I'm doing it because I want to do it. Obviously, you would assume that intrinsic is the motivation that we want to have. But that being said, I think a lot of us, and probably more people that I know, tend to run more off the external than the internal. So the end goal for me is obviously to help you guys build a little bit more intrinsic motivation. Now, that being said, I kind of look at discipline as an intrinsic motivation, right? So I kind of have this as basically bullet point 2 and 3 for me. Bullet point 2, we need to leverage motivation. Motivation comes from a couple different formats. Number one, I always say this, that results are the thing that breed motivation for people. When you're getting stronger, when you're getting leaner, when you're improving competence in your lifts, when you're seeing these progress, when you're seeing the progress and you're seeing these things improve, you are naturally going to be motivated by the thing that's driving that progress, right? So number one, we have to remember that the thing that drives progress is the work. So we have to get out of the habit of understanding that, like, well, I'm never going to be motivated if I'm not doing anything. So number one, let's get back into doing something. But the whole topic of today is, how do I get myself back into doing that thing? Because that's why I'm losing motivation, right? Because if you're losing motivation, it's probably because you're also not doing the work, or you're not seeing success from the work that you're doing. So you're doing the wrong work, right? So that's a really, really important thing to understand. Now, the extrinsic stuff, I would say for some people, and I have a handful of clients myself, I'll give you a really good example. One client of mine, Pat, I've been working with him for 8 years. I train his wife, Mel, as well. And Both really, really good shape. You know, Pat's definitely dealt with more setbacks of inconsistency with his training. Mel has definitely been super consistent for 8 years. I think for Mel, it's probably a bigger, it's a more of a motivation for her on the mental aspect than it is the physical, right? Now, Pat came from playing baseball and athletics his entire life, and I think for him, he's actually had more motivation when he has something to train for versus just the training in general, right? Now, not to call anybody out, not to call my client Pat out by all means. If you're listening to this, Pat, sorry. But there's a lot of people that are in those shoes. And to be honest with you, I actually trained with a lot of, or have in the past in my career, a lot of athletes that actually struggle with this, right? I struggled with this when I got out of athletics. I don't struggle with it anymore, but it definitely took me a handful of years to go from athletic and sport to just training for generalized stuff outside of competition and just doing it for myself and my health. And that takes a lot of time, right? Because developing that intrinsic motivation, that internal motivation to stay disciplined to doing the work, even though I know I'm not doing it for any other thing. I'm not doing it for a competition. I'm not doing it to impress anybody. So it definitely takes a lot more work to actually develop that. So for some people, if you're kind of stuck in this route, one thing that I would suggest, maybe, depending on how long you've been stuck in this, maybe sign up for something. Maybe do, a Warrior Dash or a Tough Mudder or a triathlon or a powerlifting event. And if you don't have anything to train for, you definitely, by all means, do not have to do anything. But I think it's a great way for us to generate some extrinsic motivation to get you back into that. This is kind of how I look at challenges, right? From my point of view, I've never liked challenges due to the fact that it's a short time frame, right? I don't like the idea of let's do something for 21 days, day 22, back to normal living. That being said, I've ran challenges in my gym. I've done challenges myself, and I do believe they can be very successful as long as there's an understanding that this is meant to kind of ignite some motivation, to educate you, to build some of these habits that we want to build, hoping that you can sustain majority. I mean, all of it would be beautiful, but that's never realistic. Majority of these habits that we're trying to create, or at least get back on the train of being consistent with the thing that you need to be doing, right? And that could be nutrition, that could be training, anything in life as always. So for some people, maybe think about doing something external. Do something for a competition, do an event, sign up for something that kind of creates some level of motivation, right? Join a soccer league, I don't care. Like doing other things outside of yourself with other people, I think is going to be a huge driver. Now, third one, which is kind of more on the intrinsic side and discipline, my point of view is discipline comes from the actual enjoyment of doing the thing, right? So one thing that I've learned for myself, coming back to that story of when I got out of athletics and sports and competition, I had to remember that the reason why I trained was not because I was training to get ready for something all the time, is actually because I truly enjoy training and I truly enjoy the way it makes me feel. And I really like to focus and remind myself that when I move, I feel better, I think better, I sleep better, I'm sick less, I'm in a better mood. Like everything in my life improves when I'm doing it. And I say this to a lot of people now over the last few years, that I train more for my mental than I do my physical. I've kind of, as an inside joke to the coaches, I've always said like I'm been in maintenance mode for a long time, right? And the reason why is I really don't have body composition goals. I don't have strength goals. I just love moving and I love training and I love kind of being balanced throughout all the modalities of fitness. And that's the thing that kind of keeps me going. So one of the things that I want you guys to remind yourself is really come back to the why, right? What's the reason in the first place that you actually joined the gym? What's the reason why you set these goals in place for yourself? Like, why are those goals important to you? What are these goals actually really being driven off foundationally? Because if you can get back to the why, you can really come back to that internal intrinsic motivation that desired you to start in the first place, right? Maybe it's to look better. Maybe it's to be leaner because you're single and you want to attract a partner. It could be anything, right? Like, what are the real reasons why you're doing this? Do I want to live a long time? I want to have more energy? My stress sucks when I'm not training, blah, 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 blah. So discipline comes from the enjoyment of doing the thing. It's easy to be disciplined doing something you enjoy. A lot of people, especially I see this in the business world, we talk about you have to do things that are hard, you have to suffer, you have to have grit, you have to go through these motivations or these times of low motivation to build discipline. Now here's the thing. I agree 100% with that. You definitely have to do a lot of those things. The people that are very disciplined, that are very successful in any area of life, are the ones that train through low motivation, are the one that train through setback, are the ones that make that thing their bigger priority. So it's really a change in priorities for yourself. Like, are you going to let this setback of an injury or sickness or time off or job loss or new family or whatever it is change your priorities for your own health, because that basically means that there's been an absolute change in priority, right? So we want to redirect our focus to back to what is the thing that was my why in the beginning. Why did I join Functional Lifestyles? Why did I join the gym? Why did I start working out? And then remind yourself that doing those things, how did it make me feel? One of the things that I wrote down is no one's and this was actually my 5th point, so I guess I can kind of go right there. I put no one's left a workout saying it's a bad idea, right? The hardest part is getting there. In martial arts, there's always this saying that the hardest belt to achieve is the white belt. It's not the black belt, right? Meaning the white belt's the one you get when you first join. The hardest part is always getting started. So remember this, you will always do more work in the beginning of every part of your journey. I'm dealing with this right now with, possibly opening location 2 and realizing how much work and how stressful it was when I opened up in the beginning, because I've kind of forgot about it because it's been 6 years since I've done this. And I'm reminding myself, and I'm dealing with that same stress and those same kind of mental roadblocks that I ran into, that like, it's going to be hard in the beginning. I'm going to have to do more work. Trust the process, understand the process, understand that you've made it through every hard time in your life, and just do a little bit all the time, right? Because for me, I think one of the best drivers towards stress is action, right? Like if we can take action towards the things that we need to do in our life, we start to build motivation, right? And we start to fight stress. Stress comes from us doing nothing about the thing we're thinking about. All we're doing is thinking and we're not doing. So remember that you've never left a workout complaining about it or saying that it was a bad idea. Unless it has Airdynes or burpees, then maybe, right? But really the whole point of this is understanding that getting here is the hardest part. So something that I was telling a lot of people, especially when I was doing remote training or I deal with new clients, is some of my like off-day programming that I give people is just go to the gym and get on the treadmill for 10 minutes. And if that's all you do and you go home, I'm happy with it, right? And the reason why is we need to remember the habit we're trying to build is not getting stronger in the gym or improving mobility. Sometimes the habit we're trying to build is just getting here, right? Once we get here enough times and we build a habit by doing it for a few weeks, then we can focus on what we're doing inside of the gym, right? So don't skip steps, right? A lot of people are focused on, staircase or stair number 5 and stair number 6, when really it's like the only stair and step that matters is this one right in front of you. So if you're having trouble with motivation of getting somewhere or being sick or being injured or those type of things, you need to remember just getting there needs to be the thing that we focus on. Let that action be the goal. Don't let the goal be what it was a few weeks ago prior to the injury or prior to the sickness. And when it comes to injuries and sickness, especially injuries, this is something, we have, obviously with billing department, we have, freezes, cancellations, upgrades, downgrades. She runs all these things. And something I always tell her is like, it kind of blows my mind how many people freeze their entire membership for weeks and months at a time because of an injury to one body part. I think that is one of the worst things that you can do for your fitness. I deal and have dealt with a lot of serious injuries in my life, and I still deal with things that are a little like, my back's not liking me today, my knee doesn't like me, my shoulder doesn't like me, oh, I got back from snowboarding, I feel a little crooked. There's always something to do, right? Just because my back hurts doesn't mean I'm going to go do heavy deadlifts that day. Maybe I'm doing lunges, or maybe I'm doing something. Like, I want to pick something that allows me to still exercise and move and feel good, but I don't want to do anything that aggravates that. So when you're dealing with sickness, a lot of times you're just low energy, right? So the hard part is just getting started and getting going. So doing things that you actually enjoy. Maybe you go in there and you do an arm day, or you do something that you like in the gym, or do something that's easy. Once you start to really get a sweat going, you get a little warmer, start getting some of these endorphins flowing and some of the hormonal changes that come with the benefit of working out, then it's easier to start directing yourself into something that's more structured. But I would say for the first few days or first few weeks, even for some of you, just focus on the habit of being here as being the goal. The goal is not getting stronger. The goal is not losing weight. The goal is not maybe what it used to be prior when you were consistent. The goal is now just to get us back to being consistent. So that's always a huge one, right? It's just remember that doing something is always going to be better than doing nothing, and doing nothing always compounds into making it easier to do more of nothing. Last one that I have is getting an accountability partner, right? And this comes in so many different forms. This could be a roommate. This could be, a significant other. This could be a coach. This could be anybody, because I think when you look at the 4 reasons that people struggle and don't see results: motivation, accountability, structure, and knowledge. I'm not talking about structure and knowledge today because that's not really what the question was. It's how do I deal with low motivation and lack of accountability? So having an accountability partner, the one thing I like to tell people is when you have a friend going, it's easier to say no when you're going by yourself versus telling no to somebody else. When you're paying for something, if I'm paying for a personal trainer that costs me $150 an hour, it's a lot harder to say no to that and lose $150 than it is to tell myself. So maybe if you're in one of these lulls, or you're one of these transitions of life, or you're one of these periods of low motivation, maybe that's time for you to step it up and maybe get a personal trainer, or maybe that's time for you to recruit a friend to go with you and do the same class or same workout every day. And it doesn't matter if you're coming to Functional Lifestyles or going to any gym or doing it at home by yourself. Finding these systems that create accountability for you, right? Like having these times blocked out in your Google Calendar for you knowing when you're going to work out, making that the biggest priority of your day, because that needs to be the biggest focus until you're consistent. Having someone to meet or having something to pay for. These are all forms of accountability, right? So we really want to look on like motivation, like we talked about, intrinsic, extrinsic. How can we leverage both? Discipline is a habit that is built through periods of low motivation, but discipline is something that's easier to do when you enjoy what you're doing. So maybe pick the workouts that you like better in the beginning. And that's not something that's an end game, because that's definitely not something I would recommend to see the best results, but it's the best thing to get you back into the gym. And start small, ride the bike, take walks, go to the gym for 20 minutes instead of an hour, right? Like the hard part is when you're in a period of low motivation, the work sounds daunting, right? But instead of saying I'm going to read for 30 minutes, say I'm going to read 2 pages, because it's a lot less intimidating in the beginning, and you need to lower the wall of intimidation in the beginning to just create that habit, right? You remember the mindset is always the thing that I say is the number one thing to work on for optimizing health in all areas of life, and this is kind of a little bit of what we're talking about. So getting yourself out of that little rut just requires some type of action, and the action is the thing that you got to remember, that the reward post action is always the thing that's going to create some more motivation to you to keep taking action. So just remember, instead of saying I'm going to go work out 3 times a week for an hour this week, don't focus on the week yet, focus on the day. And don't focus on the hour, focus on the 10 minutes, right? Just like scope it down more, right? Don't look in this big macro point of view. Become more present with what you're doing. If you feel that there's better times a day where you feel more motivated, if you're more motivated to do things early in the morning, then go do your workout first thing in the morning. I like to work out in the middle of the day because that's when I feel best. But if you feel better at 5 a.m. or 5 p.m., like go do that, right? Like do the thing that you enjoy that seems less daunting during the time of day where you feel the most motivation. And don't think about it in a week perspective or a month perspective. Think about it in a very, very small perspective. What today can I do and how much time do I need to get that ball rolling? Because you going in, at least getting started, is what the thing that will compound into greater and better success for yourself. And then, like I said, just remember your environment, your community. So the people that you surround yourself with, trainers, friends, significant others, the more that you can put yourself in environments where other people are already doing it, the easier it is for you to come back into building that habit. And just remember, you've done it before, right? It will happen again in the future. You've had a hard time getting started with training. You've had a hard time when you move. You had a hard time to get a new job. You have a hard time when you start a family. You have a hard time to get sick. You have a hard time to get injured. You should always be able to do something no matter what all the time, even though it might not be the ideal perfect program for yourself. So just remember, there's always something we can do. Focus on what you can control, not what you can't control. And I hope that helps. As always, guys, if there's anything that you guys can feel like you got value out of this and share this with other people, share this with people, because that's the whole goal of me doing this, is to get the message out to help you guys be more empowered, more educated, to take control of your health. And other than that, I'll be in Maui for 10 days. So I will see you guys in 2 weeks. Catch you later.